Akhetaten's Gates, Chapter 38. 3 years of bliss followed in our reign. The plague seemed to be taking fewer victims as new provisions were being met. As Smegare, I learned a great deal about ruling the country from his seat. Akhetaten and Akhetaten would sit beside us respectfully to learn their roles as future queens. Politics were as politics were. Akhetaten was a real golden child and the embodiment of a sunbeam. He brought smiles to the faces of all he passed, everywhere he went. He was 3 years old and had started to show more of a daring personality than his previous 2 timid years. Grand hopes were set before him. Akhetaten took to him best of all. He seemed to trust her even above Akhetaten, Akhetaten, Ramose, any handmaidens, General Horemheb, or even myself. Somehow, when the 2 of them were together, the sun seemed to shine just a little bit brighter. It was radiant. Life was finally settling and finally on its way to being perfect. One night, Akhetaten seemed awfully quiet at our supper. It was a small banquet, but one he seemed to be taking little enjoyment in. He had seemed rather distant most of the day, but it showed much more prominently now. He had a headache. I could tell by the way he rubbed his head idly. He wasn't paying much attention now to his guests, which wasn't that odd, actually. Late in the 16th year of his reign, the previous year, he had lost most of his sight, going almost completely blind. He was only capable now of seeing blurred shadows. It wouldn't be too long before he would eventually go completely blind. It was a sad realization that he would dim so, but I was determined to always make him and his values shine. He excused himself early, appearing quite lethargic. It was obvious that he wasn't feeling like himself. A physician had assured us that the plague was not taking him. He held no symptoms of the cursed thing, but the physician was unable to tell us what it was that was bothering the blind king. My poor Akhetaten. The only suggestion brought to us was that Akhetaten was suffering from ailments brought on by exhaustion, and that he simply needed to rest. So that's where he went. I finished with our guests some time later, leaving Akhetaten to finally hostess the foot of the party in my absence. I retired to my chambers to bathe and dress once again as a woman, transforming yet again from Smegare into Nefertiti. Then I entered into my husband's chambers and sat beside him. He seemed to be sleeping, at least until I stroked his face. "I didn't mean to wake you," I said quietly, unsure how serious his headache was feeling to him. He took my hand and led me to lay beside him, with such a gentle expression on his face. "I was hoping you'd come tonight. I was waiting for you." "Such talk," I chuckled. "Are you feeling any better?" The headache faded into a throb, but as tired as I am, I grow restless. I began to stroke his face again. "My poor Akhetaten. Tell me what is on your mind." "Nefertiti, what is it do you think that awaits us in the future? Do we even have one? What sort of talk is that? Will Aten speak to them as it has done to us? What awaits us in the afterlife? Will we rejoin as one with it?" "I am afraid that I do not have the answer for that," I replied. "Where is all this coming from?" He caressed me, stealing a few soft and intimate kisses. He even gave me a little nuzzle. "I miss the days of our youth, Nefertiti. I miss having our whole lives ahead of us. Now, before we know it, youth is gone and we are here. I miss the days when we had no worries and we play in the gardens. I miss dancing with you." "But we can still do a lot of those things, Akhetaten." "I miss swimming with you." "Well, okay, it's been years since we've done that." "I miss our childhood. It left us, Nefertiti. It vanished. Where did it go?" "But we grew up to have many great things," I explained. "We got married. You became king. You had Akhetaten and Atanism come into being. And do not forget, we've had our own children. Can you look back and remember how happy you were to become a father for the first time? Ah, yes, he said with a smile and closed his eyes. I love you, Nefertiti. I love you too. You are what makes my universe go round. I was a prophet, but you were the shining light behind it all. I smiled as he held me close for one last embrace, one last kiss, one last time. And that was it. After a final sigh, he went quiet, as if to fall back into a sleep, but I could not feel his breath upon me. I swallowed hard, feeling my heart jump into my throat. I pushed on him and turned him onto his back. Again, he seemed asleep, so peacefully, but nothing was coming out. I frantically began to feel for a pulse, listen for a heartbeat. Nothing. Nothing. He was gone. Gone! I gave him violent shakes, screaming out to him, Akhetaten! Akhetaten, wake up! No! No, you can't go! Come back! Akhetaten! The guards, having heard my screams, rushed towards the chamber and forced themselves through the doors. They paused, finding me frantically trying to wake him from a sleep that would never end. In moments, a physician and Ramose pushed through them and approached. Ramose attempted to peel me from my husband, of which I protested viciously. But suddenly, I turned to hide my sobbing face into his chest. The physician needed only to examine Akhetaten for but a moment, before he shook his head. He's gone. I'm sorry. There is nothing that I can do, Your Majesty. Hesitantly, I looked over to Akhenaten's dead body, leaving Ramose so as to crawl and kneel on the bed. Why now? I sobbed. Why did you leave me now? How am I supposed to live without you? You've been my whole world for as long as I can remember. What am I supposed to do now? We promised to stay together forever. Nefertiti, Ramose said carefully. Sminkare. What am I going to do? You're going to miss him, Your Highness, and one day you will rejoin him, mourn him, and move forward as Sminkare. That is what he would have wanted. It is you who must now teach Tutankaten what it means to be a king, my pharaoh. But His Majesty can now be at peace. I don't care how right he was. I didn't want to hear it. The guards came around to move him, only to set me off in a panic. Where are you taking him? Please, Ramose urged, grabbing hold of me. Stay calm. He has gone from his body, and now he must be prepared for the afterlife. We must decide if we must now alert his children. No, I gasped. No, they were having such a grand evening. Please, don't tell them yet, Ramose. At least wait until morning. Break it to them, as gently as you possibly can. Will you be all right? I hesitated to answer. My husband, the man that I was passionately in love with, my best friend, father of my children, my soulmate all of these years, had just died in my arms. How would I be all right? How? But, despite my feelings, almost in spite of them, I gave a tearful nod. Would you like for someone to stay with you tonight? I didn't answer, but walked past him and into the corridor. He followed silently. I had no destination in mind. I just wandered aimlessly in an eerie silence. My random steps took me toward the King's Bridge. I wasn't aware of it at the time, however. In all honesty, I felt as though I was walking in a black nothingness, taking one empty and blind step after another. I could see nothing. How could I? My heart's light was extinguished. I stopped just short of the King's Bridge and peered up at the wall. That picture, my family portrait. I found myself reaching out, running my hand over the images, over Akhetaten. I was unable to reach the child on my lap. Akhetaten, Akhetaten. This was my family when we arrived. Ramose, where are they all going? What will I do now that he is gone? I've already told you, he replied. You must mourn and then move on. You are Pharaoh Smenkhare. He pointed in the direction of the North Palace where Meroddaten resided. And she is Queen Meroddaten. You two will rule Egypt with Tutankaten to succeed you. I feel empty without him, Ramose. I feel empty without him, Ramose. I never even really imagined that he'd leave me. Not this soon. We were supposed to live a long life together. Ramose bit his bottom lip, contemplating and debating his words carefully in his mind. Maybe it is for the best. I spun around. How can you say such a thing? The man was almost completely blind. How can he rule a country if he cannot see? Face it, he would have had to forego all of his dignity and depend on you to take care of him. You would therefore be ruling Egypt anyway. Sooner or later, word would get out to everybody. Whether you want to believe it or not, there are a lot of discontented people who would take advantage of that. Where he is now, he can see everything, just as Aten does. Nobody can hurt him where he is. He no longer feels any pain or suffering. No longer does he have to stress over the things of which he toils and brings himself discontent. I have followed Akhetaten for many years, and I believe that he has chosen to leave Egypt in your capable hands. It was official. After a grand funeral, I was, once and for all, Pharaoh Smenkhare. There was no turning back. Nefertiti was gone. I idly held on to the crook and flail as Meroddaten walked beside me. I wanted it to be done. Even just seeing the sarcophagus was enough to make my whole soul ache. I stopped suddenly, feeling weary. It'll be okay, Meroddaten said, patting my back. Grandma will keep him in line until we get there. Until then, let's make him proud, okay? How can you display such strength? I asked. It sounds... I know how it sounds, she replied, but it won't do us any good to fall apart. I loved him too, and you could say I loved him more than any of my siblings. Believe me, I may not have your years, but this kills me inside too. I take comfort in knowing that this is temporary. There will be an Akhetaten again, and a Akhetaten, and all those who have been lost. Temporary, I repeated. If he joins with Aten, that will mean that he can see. He loved you most when you smiled. Let's not disappoint him in his new eyes. I watched her face a moment before finally giving in to a soft and thoughtful smile. She gave a kind laugh and placed another gentle pat on my back. Thank you, Meroddaten. I'll leave you now. You know where to find me. That is, if you'll be all right. I'll be fine, Meroddaten. I want to visit with Aten myself. I wanted to take care of him. She gave me a nod and left me to be on our separate ways. I lost sight of her when I turned the corner and made my way to the temple. It felt dark. The sun was shining in as usual, but it still felt like a heavy shadow was looming. There were no priests present, making the temple feel so cold and isolated. I peered up at the sun, unsure if I wanted to cry. Speak to me. Why don't you speak to me? Can't you tell me anything? I grit my teeth in frustration. No, I couldn't get angry. That wouldn't accomplish anything. Meroddaten was right. I had to stay strong and believe in myself. I was Pharaoh. A slow applause startled me, making me choke on a breath. I spun around to see I. Of course, immediately, my suspicion rose. What are you doing here? The inner sanctum is for the royal family alone. Look at you, he said with the brightest of smiles. I hadn't even imagined this sort of turnaround. My daughter went from queen to pharaoh. What a great pleasure to behold Smenkhara, king of Egypt. What a sudden change of heart, I remarked. But bullshit. Let's make peace, my child, he insisted. Let's not fight or be sour any more. Oh, of course. It all looks good for you now, I spat. I am Pharaoh, and I have an indirect heir. But I will be training him. So in the end, it makes your ego swell, and it brings you great pleasure. Your conditional love is disgusting. But you cannot deny my great talents, Menkare. I would make a great ally. Everything would prove to my benefit. My child is Pharaoh, and one of my granddaughters shall be queen when your heir takes the throne. I am as well off as I could possibly be without being a member of the inner sanctum of court. But if you make me one of your advisors, I believe we can accomplish a strong kingdom and intercept any trouble. I frowned. He had me on that. It would prove more to my benefit to keep him close now, especially with the unrest that would soon arise. I didn't like it, but I was in the perfect position to be vulnerable. There was nothing to prevent this promotion of sorts, except my own bitterness. Very well. Good, I chuckled. I'm glad that we finally had that settled. Now, how do you plan to continue all of this Aten stuff? Stuff? I gasped. It exists. I have heard it. It has spoken to me. Will it speak to Tutankhaten? Can you be sure of it? You don't know. I don't think he can speak with Amun either. Priests are able to interpret Amun. Nobody was able to interpret Aten except for Akhenaten. What if Aten does not speak to the boy? He is not your son by his father. Your daughters have not been recorded as having heard it either. If there are no prophets, then who will interpret? I believe not only the royal family is capable of hearing it. I believe that Hara had heard it before. Aten is too scattered, then. Priests will undermine a king in the old ways, I argued. You are such a bull-headed bitch, he sighed. You remind me of my first mother-in-law. There is time to let me do as I please and come to terms with myself. I will decide what needs to be done. The boy is only a baby. Let him be a child. I crossed his arms. Oh dear, he sighed. Very well. Have your fun for now if it will bring you some peace. Even I have to admit that this city is rather empty without him here, and I didn't even like him. But eventually, you will realize what is best for that boy in his future. When that time comes, I will be here.